Please take a seat. First, I'd like the new additions to the stage to reflect with a few sentences on what you just heard from the minister and from Dorota. Would you like to start, Monika?
Oh, yes, please. Well, first I would like to thank you for inviting me here. I was really impressed yesterday when I saw what wonderful things you have done for the cultural and creative interests in Malmö and in Skåne region, and I have to congratulate you on that. I was really impressed with what the minister said about innovation, that innovation is for the people, and it's obvious that you have accomplished so many things because of the cooperation. You're really good at that. And equality is the driving force. That's really inspiring, I think, for everybody. As you know, I come from Greece, from a totally different background, a country that is facing an extreme economic crisis. And maybe at this time, doesn't seem that culture and creativity is a big priority when you face a humanitarian crisis. But I have to say that it is a huge priority. Although the artists and the creative people are suffering, that they're struggling to survive, art is thriving in Greece. They find the means to work and offer hope to other people who are suffering. So I can tell you that even in the most difficult times, culture survives, and that's essential for the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monika. Maria Riskova?
Thank you. Thank you as well for invitation, and I'm very excited that I'm here for the first time in Sweden. Yeah, so just a few notes. Mr. Minister, it was so great to hear that you so many times stressed people, that sometimes we who are dealing with culture objects, of course we are not forgetting, but like we are so focusing on collecting, on protecting, on digitalization and so on, and sometimes we forget about people, and you stress in every sentence, in every criteria what we need for development people. And what is great for me coming from Slovakia to hear, it's this courage to dare to try new things, because we were facing, of course, in 90s huge crises like development, creating new economical systems where the whole region stayed without work. It was like very, very hard times, and it was the time when we were facing desperation and yes, like to realize that we can try new things, that we can go on, it's very important. And to hear it from politicians is for me really something what is warm in my heart. And yes, like education and role of equality, it's very important. But what is, maybe it sounds anecdotal, but it's really important what you said about how sometimes our industries are considered to be fun, that it's this entertainment, that it's something what is additional, it's not something what is so important. This is what I am facing in my work a lot, because I am a director of design center, and still in Slovakia design is many times considered for the surface. It's something what is aesthetical, it's not so important, and we belong under Ministry of Culture, and many times I have to fight and I have to negotiate with Ministry, for instance, of Economics, that it's as well as important. And what Dorota was saying, I have just another one note about the importance of culture heritage. Again, for me it's not such a surprise that it's a part of all our economies, what we are talking about. And even my institution was establishing new design museum recently, so it can be also a model situation. We are in contact with older traditional institutions, and for me it's really encouraging that they admire the energy and what we are creating. We admire their tradition and what they are doing, and our collaboration is really growing. So culture heritage is in the game for sure.
Thank you, Maria. Yolanda Smits?
Yes, first of all, I do not work for the European Commission, although it's stated there, you
Oh.
correctly said it. So I work for KEA European Affairs, which is basically a research company and a think tank for the cultural and creative industries. But we do prepare a lot of studies for the European Commission and the European Parliament. I would like to be a little bit more provocative. And when we're talking about innovation, I think we should also talk about sustainability of the artist. Now, that's very important because they do need to be paid for what they do if you're going to ask them to contribute to a number of policies like social cohesion, etc. Dorota mentioned something very important. That's actually the copyright package. And that's a big dossier now in the European Commission and in the European Parliament. And it is all about ensuring that the artists are better remunerated for whatever they do in the digital environment. Up to date, basically most policymakers, maybe not you, but let's say the ones dealing with economy, innovation, SMEs, entrepreneurship, they have focused on technological innovation. And that has led to a number of very big tech giants, super companies, to grow and to grow and to grow. I would just like to give you an example. For example, if we look now at the top 3 companies of the Fortune 500, who do we find there? We find Apple, Google, and Microsoft. 10 years ago, they were not there, at least on the top. There were more gas companies like ExxonMobil, Gazprom, and another one. So they have been able to grow tremendously. And what they have in their credo is that they basically don't believe in copyright. And you know, copyright is the basis, is the main assets which a lot of artists have. And they don't believe in that. So they are becoming bigger and bigger, and now we're going to have the fight with the copyright directive to ensure that basically the artists are being paid. Just to give you an idea how big they are, is, for example, these 3 companies which I just mentioned, the Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they now, let me see, what do they do? They have a turnover, revenues of 250 billion euros a year, and they have market capitalization of $1 trillion. But at the same time, we're here also talking about Europe, how we have to improve, and we have to talk about growth and employment. But these big companies with such large revenues, they only employ like a bit less than 170,000 people. But it's still, the Commission and a lot of politicians, they're only interested in listening to that. I have now seen that the Commission is changing, especially the Juncker cabinet and the Commission, and now they're paying more attention actually to the artists. And I hope that will continue. But the way things are going, you know, we're going to have a difficult fight in order to be able to be paid for anything on the internet. But I'll go on to that one a bit later.
Thank you, Yolanda. This is important stuff, I can tell. Speaking of new regulations and support, Dorota, you mentioned quite a lot of packages and structures and support for the CCIs. My question is, how does these support systems actually reach the cultural entrepreneurs? How can we sort of make that transition of new, the implementation of the new policies and the new strategies and the new, for instance, the copyright, new writings on copyright? How could we make that transition easier down into the creative entrepreneurs?
I think the answer is very simple. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. On the side of the Commission, we have to rethink our ways of reaching to people. If we follow this people-based approach, what is our objective? Creators, artists, which are not only the targets, but who are the essence of culture creative industries, then we have to find ways to communicate with them, to talk to them. Well, for the programs, for the EU-funded programs, they are obviously in each of the countries desks, so people who are responsible for kind of intermediaries between the Commission and people on the ground. For us, it's important that those people talk to each other across different funding models and convey messages. Whereas we can step in and talk directly to people, we are doing so. And this is, for example, also for us, I use this opportunity to inform you about the fact that there are many opportunities. When it comes to the management, you are well aware that there are different ways of managing EU funds. You have direct management for Horizon and for Creative Europe, for example, but you also have decentralized management for Erasmus Plus and for the structure funds. So this is a role here for regional authorities to be the messengers, to be the ambassadors towards artists and creatives.
Thank you. I think that's actually lots what's going on in this region we're at now.
Yeah.
There is a lot of sort of funneling out of information and also funds, actually. Trends. Which are the large trends in this sector? I'd like to turn to Monika here. From your perspective in Greece, we talk about digitalization, we talk about reindustrialization, and how about the rural and urban aspects? What would you like to say on that, Monika?
Well, it's definitely the regional funds from the European Union are really regenerating rural areas, and they are extremely good for all these rural areas that are suffering from demographic. They have demographic problems and things like that. But the biggest trend, to be honest, for me is a difference. Even the European Union is changing now the way they see the culture and creative industries. The main, I can see a difference. It used to be mainly the economic value that was counting mostly, but now I think that more social values or environmental values are counting more. So I think that this is the mega trend coming mainly from the needs, from the global needs to change. So I think that's the huge trend of the times, to be honest.
Do you agree, Yolanda and Maria, with the trends?
Yeah. For me, I would agree with what you're saying. For me, another trend which is interesting to see is the craft sector, which is really starting to boom. There are a lot of people who are now getting fed up, let's say, of mass products. Everything is made in China, and they're willing to make things more sustainable, and therefore they are looking at the craft sector to produce more, let's say, local products that are a bit more special. And this is now also becoming more possible actually through innovation and through the internet, because the machinery is becoming much more cheaper, so people are able to produce, and then the internet and innovation is allowing them actually to reach out to their user, to the consumers, which before was not possible because they needed a middleman. And one example, for example, is the beer industry. Here you see a lot of small breweries opening up, like for example in Spain. I think it was in the.
We have them in Sweden too. The microbreweries. Yeah.
Yes, just but one example. So there were in 2014 there were 20 breweries, and now there are like almost 300 breweries. So it's this back going to the essential products and people being able to do it.
How about you, Maria? How about trends from your perspective?
I will add something what you said to the craft development of crafts. As an art historian and academic by education, I have to add something about terminology. There is this post-digital era or post-digital term, what you are maybe aware of. Of course, at the end of 90s, it was said that digital revolution is already over, and all this like digital boom somehow finished. But of course, we were developing also digital culture, but what happened later was that people were starting to come back again to haptical experience and really to crafts, to something what is physical, to physical objects. And my really like most favorite example are touch screens that, okay, now we jumped out of screens and from mouses to touch screen, and we are touching again the technology. So let's have on mind this post-digital context in what we are moving. But of course, still the trend of digitalization and all digital products, the gamification, of course, it's a huge trend. And I have to say, open culture. It's another topic, but open culture is really strong, and we shouldn't forget about it, even in the discussion about intellectual property, that open design, open copyrights, things which we share with other people, it's really huge, and it will grow, because people are taking really action to their hands, and they're starting even medical labs and even like research facilities for researching healthcare, so we should be aware of this.
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to turn to the Minister Damberg again. As a leader, traveling a lot and looking into these fields, what opportunities do you see as a leader to really push for this connection with the CCIs and sustainable growth?
I think there are huge opportunities. I think more and more countries see the values of this. I think almost every minister that I've been talking innovation with on a more advanced level, they mention these kind of sectors because they know that they cannot engineer only to develop innovation. They have to work with differences and the clashes to actually make it happen. You have different perspectives. I think this momentum when it comes to innovation for this industry to take a bigger role, and not just itself, but actually going into different industries to make an impact. I would say that, but the digital revolution, I think it's hard to grasp what it really will it mean in 20 years' time. It goes so fast, so it is changing everything. The role of politics, the role of engaging with people, how we do it, the role of culture and is of course changing as well. So we're in an interesting time. So then what's really important for you or your region will be increasingly important, I think. So it's both a digital global world, and on the same time you have to find your roots and be stable somewhere. So it's kind of two megatrends at the same time, I think.
Reflections? Maria, you're taking notes?
Yeah, I would like to come back a bit to Spotify. So for a lot of, it's of course a wonderful service. It's a streaming service that everybody is so happy with. Let's say at least in the music industry, and it's a real big example. But I think if we do not, let's say, ensure that the copyright directive is properly adopted, then there is a danger for Spotify to disappear, because at the moment we have Google, they have YouTube, and basically all the music is available on YouTube, and YouTube is big. It's like has 1 billion users, whereas Spotify has 100 million. So you have very big YouTube, and then Spotify very little. So, but YouTube feels that they don't have to remunerate the artists. Spotify does that. But if we don't get this balance right, YouTube will become bigger, and Spotify, which is a real leader, will disappear. And that would be a shame. So I think that is something that you should look at. Even, for example, we have another company, which I spoke about, Apple. It also has its own music service, but it's making Spotify smaller, because now you have, for example, Spotify, you can get a subscription. But if you want to have that subscription, you can go to the website of Spotify and get it. Or you can go to one of the apps via Apple. And then what happens is that 30% goes to Apple. So Apple Music is now making more money from Spotify than its own services. And it's all about this thinking of you as Minister of Innovation, that you have to take into account, you know, the needs of the artists to be able to develop. And it would be such a shame if Spotify would disappear, because it's one of the great European examples.
Reflections, Dorota or Mikael Damberg?
First of all, I would say it's strange if you think that this part of the economy should not have intellectual property rights. Why? Why should we treat the digital side of the economy totally different from other sectors of society? I think that is something we have to challenge, because otherwise this sector will kill, I think, the creative industries in the long run. So I don't think that's an option.
danger.
I think digital economy really is an advantage if you use it. You can follow everyone to see what everyone has looked at, to fix smart payment systems, guarantee that the artists are being paid what they should by deals that are made. So I think the digital age is really an opportunity, but it is really also about property rights. And I think it is relevant to raise the issue not only on a national basis, but on an international level. I think it's important.
Intangible production equals environmental production, because it doesn't emit as much as other consuming other stuff does, obviously. But we need to increase the consumer, how we consume more culture instead of consuming stuff. So how do we do this? I mean, I'm looking at you, Dorota, we thinking about the inner market of the EU. We really need to make a push to whet the appetite of people, going away from flying to places instead of enjoying arts locally in their town.
Well,
Do you have any sticks or carrots to use?
Well, sticks and carrots. Obviously, this is a very broad question, and I think the response is in audience development. How are we developing our audiences locally? And here, local and regional authorities are playing an enormous role again to support culture organizations, to increase their audiences and to engage with people, because this is the essence actually of audience development. And actually, the crowdfunding project we are implementing is an audience development instrument, because when it comes to crowdfunding in culture creative sectors, you see the opportunity for new audiences to get in, to engage with a project, to engage with an artist. And this is for us a hope or an expectation that in the time of digital risk somehow, obviously they are digital opportunities, but also digital risk, that could be a method, that could be a tool for artists to reach out to more people, and also for culture to be more prominent, to play a socially stronger role. I don't know whether I answered your question.
No, you did. Actually, I'd like to ask the audience, how many have partaken in any crowdfunding in here? Have started a project or pitched in?
Great.
I'd say 60%, Dorota, 70?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're up. Okay, good. How about looking at the situation of unemployment? That's another big topic, because we do have large cut-downs in many countries, especially also in the public sector, of course, when it comes to arts and culture. If you look at the political field, how can the politicians sort of safeguard so we don't sort of slash down the arts and the cultural field? Mikael Damberg. That's another big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. Not my responsibility in the government, but on the other hand, we made priority in the government. We have to. Politics is about priorities, not only wishes. So you have to maintain some common ground in a society. What makes a society a society? Then I think it's more than only people and consumers. It's a culture cultural environment, fostering in generation, educational system, but also culture. So I think it's working with the common goods, making a priority for the public sector to actually hold a position so that some of the culture infrastructure is there and relevant over time. But on the other hand, as Minister for Enterprise and Innovation, I also want the culture cluster to actually look at the business opportunities. Of course, that's not the same question that you asked, but sometimes to be too much dependent on only the public finance side of the economy might make this cluster weaker than it could be, I think.
But that's also very much connected to where we started, about sort of being on icing on the cake. It's just fun. It's not really a tangible sort of part of society. So
Yeah,
that's something
and
we
many
have to
of the
work on
artists doesn't like this. They don't want to do it themselves. So how do we actually make the organization support for artists to actually be involved in a business-like environment that they can make money, to take a good salary from it so they can sustain it over time? It is important as well. But on the other hand, you have to have a public policy debate on what's the cultural role in a society, what kind of public investments are you willing to do to actually ensure this. You cannot have, I wouldn't argue that you can have only this private market-based culture politics. That would be totally wrong. But I think you should look at the possibility to stand on two legs.
Monika, you mentioned before that even if you're going through very rough times in Greece, you're actually able to sort of hold on to the cultural entrepreneurship, and the stages are still sort of open and attracting people.
The public authorities, they shouldn't only subsidize, but also facilitate artists and the creative sector in different ways. But I can tell you from my experience that even if the recession is very strong and the public funds are really almost nothing for the public funding for culture, always the artistic expression is finding a way out. It's amazing. In Greece, people maybe where we have 25% unemployment, the artists don't have a work, but they work constantly. It's thriving really. We have lots of artistic skills now. They're not getting paid for that. Sometimes people are going there and just they don't have to pay a ticket just to bring food for the people who are suffering more. So we have to see the artistic expression as something which is social, and the need for the people to express themselves, and it's the need of the audience, of the society, to live with culture and have and that makes them feel that there is hope, because otherwise there's nothing. So this is essential, I think.
It's a wonderful statement, isn't it? So, Maria, in your country, how do you defend culture in times of recession and hard times?
I think that what Monika said, that the hope and the guidance is something what we really can provide, and it's one of our main tasks maybe, that culture always is kind of beacon, and we are holding the, I don't know, like creative people, they can find ways in many even difficult situations. And maybe us leaders and people who are given public money are the ones who should really say and who should know the people whom to support. So I would say that, yes, it's also on us, like to say if we support production or if we support experiment, and it's a great responsibility.
Thank you. Let's talk for a minute about climate change. Deborah mentioned earlier in her speech, and I talked to her yesterday also about the lack of being able to tell stories about this major challenge that we're in the midst of. And we just finished the climate meeting in Marrakesh. How could we as cultural creators be more apt to sort of push the narrative in this story, to really sort of get the message out? I mean, we do have a small window to manage the future of the planet. And how can we as cultural people here sort of make that into an open door where culture can really sort of push stuff? What do you say, Dorota?
I would see it broader, culture for climate change, but I would say that culture is needed for democracy today. And democracy comprises, for me, challenges such as migration, such as climate change. And I think the artists can bring solutions through design thinking, getting out of, how to say, politically correct pep talk somehow, but opening the language and opening to people, trying to come back to the values which are our guiding values, the fundamental rights. I think we can resolve, or we can help resolving societal problems. How to do it? Obviously I don't have a receipt.
That's why we're here talking about this today.
Yeah.
Any more reflections? Final reflections?
Yeah, okay,
before
so
coffee?
also what Dorota mentioned, the Commission is now using also culture in its foreign relation, culture diplomacy. And if we're talking about climate change, you know, we're not just going to talk to each other here in Europe, because I think more or less we are okay about it and we want to find a solution. But it is important actually to go out there and talk with people around the world. And I think there, let's say the culture and creative sector can do something. So, for example, we can talk about a number of issues together with cultural people in different countries. Now, for example, also the US, but in Russia, in let's say in African countries, in China. So there, because we have certain values, we can use them and let the artists enter into engagement with people outside. Because that's, you know, they are able to really create these wonderful networks around the world. So that could be maybe an option.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts up here with me. It's now time for a break. We will meet back again at 3:30. And we just touched upon a few things. We realized that. Then the discussions will continue. And before you leave the stage, you will also get some chocolate from Malmö.